So I'll give you a general intro to model space and paper space. I'm simply going to click on new. I don't care that I'm not using my AutoCAD template. I simply just want to start a new drawing file because I need to give you an overview of model space and paper space. If you look at the bottom left corner of the screen, there are tabs. The first one says model, and it's highlighted because I am currently in what we refer to as model space. This is where we have been modeling all of our files, and we have focused on 2D modeling. And like I said, we're not going to be doing any 3D modeling, but this is definitely the space where it would be happening. That's why it's called model space. You might see it abbreviated as MS, which is short for model space. Next to that, you have a layout 1 and a layout 2. I'm going to click on layout 1 right now. And when I click on it, you'll see that it now looks like a sheet of paper. And this is why we refer to this as paper space. By default, there's always going to be a layout 1 and a layout 2. In this space here, I call it paper space because that's how I've known it for a long time. But AutoCAD refers to it also as a layout space. The reason I still call it paper space is because if you look down here over by the drawing aids, you'll see that it shows me paper, and it's going to allow me to toggle between paper space. And if I click on this for just 1 second, it's going to toggle me into model space. But this is what is referred to as floating model space, and it is floating inside of paper space or inside of a layout. And now let me click on model one more time, and it toggles me between that floating model space and this space, which is paper space, or in this case, it's referred to as layout 1. Every single drawing has these settings. We have been in model space. I just clicked on it to take me back to model space. We've been drawing in model space, everything. But now that it's time for us to present, we're going to take full advantage of the layouts. You notice that when I clicked on layout 1, this is what shows up by default. If I hover right here and I click on this object, it tells me that it is a viewport. And then it's also showing me a custom scale. We'll talk about scales in a little bit, but I simply wanted to point out the fact that this is a viewport, and this viewport is allowing me the opportunity to see through the paper, through the layout, into what I would be drawing in model space. Let me show you. If I switch back to model space, and I'm going to zoom out a little bit here, and I'm going to draw a circle. So I'm going to type C, enter, and I'll just draw a circle right here. And then I'll switch over to layout. There's the circle. I can't see all of it. But now, if I double click inside of this floating model space, inside of this viewport, I'm going to do a double click. And now I'm going to zoom out. There's the circle. And you notice when I zoom out, to be real technical here, I'm changing the scale. I'm going to take advantage of this viewport when I start to use it so that I can place my drawings within a floating model space viewport and set it to an architectural scale. And then in paper space, and let me switch back to paper space now, just by simply double clicking outside of this viewport. What I'm going to do is I'm going to place my border so that when I put it all together, it's going to appear as if I have my site plan or my floor plan or my elevations or sections sitting within the border. And then I'm going to be controlling the architectural scale through the viewport. That's my intro to model space, paper space. And it's okay if it doesn't make as much sense right now as it probably could. And that's because I haven't put it to practice. But I just thought it would be easier to show this to you by itself, isolated. And then the last thing I want to do is this. I'm going to come over here to my application button and click on that. And then I'm going to come down here to the options. In the options window, I'm going to click on display. In display, I'm going to show you down here in layout elements. I am currently displaying the layout and model tabs. That's why I see them in the lower left-hand corner. If I turned off or unchecked that box, they would go away. But it's helpful to have them there, so I'm going to leave it alone. Next, it indicates that the display printable area is also checked on. So it's going to show me where I can print on this sheet of paper. And if I look over at my sheet of paper, you see the dashed lines on all four sides. That's basically showing me the margins that I have based on whatever generic printer I may have set up. And this will change also based on the printer that I'll pick in just a little bit. Next, it's indicating that it's displaying the paper background. Now, I could turn off display paper background and then apply that. And you'll see the whole screen just turns to this solid white color, but I still have my printable area shown. This could work out, but I know that a lot of people have grown accustomed to seeing that paper background, so I'll turn it back on and apply it. And then if you want, you can always display the paper shadow. It doesn't do too much, and that's why it's turned off by default, so I'll leave that alone. This box here is checked off where it says Show Page Setup Manager for new layouts. I'll show you how to access the Page Setup Manager, and we will definitely need to do that to change the paper size. And then there's this last one here where it says Create Viewport in New Layouts. As soon as I go to a new layout, it's going to generate a viewport. And that's what I pointed out to you, that floating model space viewport. I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And when it comes time, I'm actually going to have you select that viewport and simply delete it so that we can start from scratch. I just wanted to show you the options there so that you're aware of what's happening here and how you can have a little bit more control over that space. I am now going to close out of this drawing number one, and I do not want to save any changes. And what I'd like to do now is begin with my presentation drawings. I'm going to click on the new dropdown. I'm going to select my template. If you don't see it there, go ahead and browse your templates and you'll find it there. But since I have it here, I'm going to click. So this is my template, my AutoCAD template. Now I'm going to format my units as I have been doing all along. And then I'm going to click OK. And then I'm going to save my file. Because it's a brand new file, I can simply type save or I can type save as. Either one is going to be fine. Type save and enter. And then navigate to your folder where you have your files. Go ahead and save this first initial last name again. And we're going to refer to this drawing as a presentation drawing. I think I want to keep my plans separate from my elevations. This one is going to be my presentation plans, which is going to include my site plan and my floor plan. And I'm going to be using two layouts. So first initial last name, presentation plans, and then you can go ahead and save it. Now I will proceed to bring in the information that I need. And I'm going to take full advantage of my external references. External references are the images of your drawing files inside of another drawing file. In Model Space, I will go ahead and externally reference my site plan. So I go over to my external references and I have it open here on the side. And if you don't have it open, go ahead and type XR for XREF, but mine's here. I hover over it and then I come over here to the icon and I'd like to attach a DWG. And what I'd like to attach is going to be my site plan. And it has the X in front of it. Why? Because I am externally referencing it multiple times. That's the file I'd like to use. I will go ahead and click open. From here, I'll leave the reference type as attachment. The scale is 1:1. For the insertion point, I would like it to come in at 0, 0. For my path, I'm going to click on no path because all of the files are residing within the same folder. And then I will click OK. There's my site plan. I need to zoom out pretty far, and I can type Z enter, E enter to zoom extents, or I can come over here and hover over this toolbar and just click on this icon for zoom extents. So I'll click right there, and that is showing me the extent of my drawing. And I'll zoom out a little bit more. And then if I hover over the file and then click on it and then leave my cursor right here for a moment, it should be telling me that it's an XREF, even though it's not saying anything. But it is an XREF. I know it's an XREF because up in the ribbon, I can see that it has changed. It's highlighting or showing me external reference. I'll tap the escape key now. But I simply just wanted to hover over it and then click so that I can see that it is an external reference. Now I'm going to tap the escape key. So that's step one, is externally referencing the site plan in here. And the site plan, if you recall, has the floor plan referenced into it. So it's nested. So if I go back to my external references, you see there are two files listed there. And I'm going to come over here and click on Tree View, and you'll see there's my site. And within the site, I have my plan nested. Just wanted to show that to you, and I can click away from it, and I will now proceed to bring in my border. To do that, I will now switch over to Layout 1. And when I switch over to Layout 1, by default, it brings in this viewport. I will go ahead and select that viewport and tap the delete key. I don't want to use that one. I'm going to show you how to create your own. The next thing I need to do is change this sheet size. We are going to be using an 11 by 17 sheet. Down here, I will hover over Layout 1, the tab, and then I'm going to right click. I will then click on Page Setup Manager. From here, Layout 1 is highlighted, and I will now click on Modify. When I go to Modify, this looks a lot like that plot dialog box. So what I'm going to do is complete as much information as I can here about my page. So the printer that I'd like to use is the AutoCAD PDF general documentation. The paper size, I do want to go with a full bleed sheet, but I need to use my 17 by 11 full bleed. ANSI full bleed B 17 by 11. And I'm using full bleed because I want to make sure that I can draw all the way to the edge of my sheet, even though I know that I'm going to be using a printer that might give me some margins. And then the plot area, I want to plot the extents. I will want to center the plot. And for the plot scale, I want to leave it at a scale of 1:1 because I'm going to control the scale of the drawing by way of the viewport. And then I can also set my plot style table now, and I'll go ahead and use monochrome. I will now go ahead and click OK. And as soon as I do that, you're going to see the sheet size change. And then I'm going to close out. It does not have that printable area, the limits of the margin, because this is a full bleed sheet. Now, what I'm going to do is externally reference my border in here. So I go back to my external references. I come back up here and I click Attach DWG. And I would like to attach the border. I will now click Open. Everything that I see on the settings looks to be okay. The only thing I want to change is this path type, and I'll set it to no path. Scale is fine. Insertion point is also fine. So I'll go ahead and click OK. So there's my border. I'm going to zoom out for a moment, and you'll see that the border is not quite centered on the sheet of paper. And this is just something that I need to fix because for whatever reason, AutoCAD just doesn't adjust this for me. So here's what I'm going to do to fix this issue. I'm going to go back to my Layout 1 tab, hover over it, right-click it, go to the Page Setup Manager, go to Modify of that Layout 1, and I'm going to turn off Center the Plot, and then I'm going to turn it back on. That's it. And then I'm going to click OK. And then I will go ahead and close. And what this is doing is it's allowing AutoCAD to readjust the settings. So when I close out, settings are readjusted. And now my border is centered on this sheet. And I'll go ahead and zoom extents again. And notice how it appears that this border is sitting on an 11 by 17 sheet of paper. And that's exactly what I wanted to do. When I constructed the border, I made sure to set my limits to 11 by 17. So I now have my border, my X border, externally referenced in paper space. And when I switch over to model space, I have my site plan externally referenced in model space. Now I need to put the two together. I'll go back to Layout 1. And I told you that I'd show you how to make your own viewports. But before we do that, we're going to create a new layer in this drawing file. Mind you, this drawing file has only one active layer, which is layer 0, but it also has the other layers that have been brought in based on the other drawing files. So I really have not drawn anything in here yet, even though it looks like I did, because I have images of drawings in here. Just wanted to point that out. Now for my layer properties manager, I'm going to hover over that, and then I'm going to click on new layer. And I'd like you to name this new layer MVIEW. That stands for MView. Make it any color that you want. In my case, I'm going to make it red so that you can see it on the screen. And then set it so that it will not plot. Click on the printer. And now this layer will not print. We're going to see it in our drawing file, but we're not going to see it on the PDF or a piece of paper if we print it out. And then the next thing I'll do here is click on the status icon. I'll double click it, and this becomes my current layer. Moving my cursor away from the layer properties manager, I'm back here. And now my current layer is MView. And what I would like you to do now so that you can construct your own viewport is to type in MView. So I do this on purpose. The layer is MView. The command is also MView here. So I type MView and then enter. Specify a corner of the viewport and make a viewport that takes up most of the sheet. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to take the viewport and let it sit outside of my sheet. And I'm doing this on purpose because I'm going to resize it in a little bit. But I want you to see that I'm not limited to drawing just within this paper layout. Or rather, I'm not limited to drawing within the limits of that paper that's shown on screen. So I'm going to click right here and then all the way over here like this. And right away, what's happening is it shows me the contents of model space. And I do want to see my site plan. Now I can take my viewport, and this is what I wanted to show you. I can change it, make it fit within the border. But I'm going to be real careful to not click too close to the border because then it snaps to those endpoints and it gets a little tricky to pick the border. Just make sure to be mindful of that. I have my viewport all set up, my floating model space viewport. Now what I'm going to do is go into that floating model space viewport. And I can do that by double clicking inside of it like this. And now if I'd like to go back to my paper space, I click outside of that viewport. And you'll notice how right now the cursor is active within the viewport and it's bold. But as soon as I move it away, it turns into this cursor, this arrow. I'll double click now. And it takes me back to paper space. To go back, I can double click or come down here to your drawing aids and toggle from paper back to model. And that takes you into floating model space. The next thing to do is to take your drawing, pan it so it is somewhere in the center of that viewport, and then establish the architectural scale of this viewport. And you can do that by coming down here to your drawing aids and then click to adjust the scale of the viewport. So I'm going to click on that number right there, that value. It pulls up the different options for scale. And because I did a test run on this before, I know that 3/32 of an inch will work. So go ahead and click on 3/32. And there is the site, rather my property. I don't need to see the entire site, but it would be helpful if I place it so I can see the corner and I'm still seeing my site plan. Now for me, I've mentioned it before that seeing the grid is a little much for me. So while I'm in this viewport, I'm going to go ahead and turn off the grid. I will go back to paper space by clicking down here, toggling between model and paper. And now if I simply click once on the viewport, I can see that it is set to 3/32 of an inch equals a foot. And what I'm going to do now is lock it. Now, if I go back into that viewport like this, by double clicking, and I try to zoom out or zoom in, and I could do that by accident, notice how the scale does not change. It's actually zooming the entire layout. Watch. If I unlock that viewport and now I accidentally zoom out, it changes the scale. Zoom in, still changing the scale. This is why it's important to go in there, set that scale, and then lock it. And now when I zoom out and in, nothing happens. I will now go back out to paper space. And then there are two system variables that I need to change right now. You'll notice that in this viewport, the property line is just coming in as a continuous line. But when I go back to model space, it's actually the property line that I want to have. To fix that, what I'll do is I'll use two system variables. The first one is PSLT scale, and then enter. And I want to turn off PSLT scale. PS is short for paper space. LT, line type. So paper space line type scale, I'm going to set that to 0 and enter. And then another system variable is MSLT scale. Model space, line type, scale. I'm going to enter. And I'm going to set that new value to 0. So I'm turning both off. You don't need to be too concerned about what these mean. I'm just trying to help you output. So simply type 0 and enter. And now, in order to see the changes take effect, because it still hasn't, I'm going to type in this command, regen all. And what that means is regenerate all spaces, model space and paper space. So when I type regen all and enter, now I see the property line the way it should be. And any dashed lines should also appear correctly. And I'll toggle back to model space. And then from here, I think I also want to turn off the grid for my own sake. And I'm ready to add some annotations. But before I do that, I'll go back to this layout. I will go ahead and look at a print preview. I'm going to use Control P, and I don't have to select the printer or the paper size because that was already done ahead of time when I set up the layout. So now I simply have to preview. And you can see it appears that my site plan is sitting on that border. Hard to tell that I used a viewport. And speaking of the viewport, you do not see it because it is on the layer that we created. We named it MView and we set it to do not plot. We're on our way. We just need to add some annotations. And by annotations, I mean the title and also come up with some fictitious names for the street and then put in the dimensions of our property. And that should do it. I will go ahead and close out. I'll go ahead and cancel this. I just wanted to see what it would look like and then switch back to model space. So what I'd like to do is set up my annotation scale in model space to match the scale of the viewport. So in layout 1, I just hover over the viewport. It tells me standard scale, 3/32 of an inch equals a foot. I go back to model space, and for model space, I go into my scale and I set that to 3/32 of an inch equals a foot also. So now we're matched up. I also want to make sure that what I do next, I make sure that I'm not on the MView layer because that layer is set to do not print. So I don't want to make any mistakes there. So I will go ahead and set layer 0 as my current layer. And remember, when I externally referenced the border and the site plan, layer 0 was my current layer, and that's how it should be. So the next thing that I'm going to ask that you do is to open the file that I provided you with. So go to Open, and from your files, go ahead and select the HWC annotations. Just open that file. And what I've done here with this file is I've gone ahead and created a title that you can use. And this title is using block attributes. I've also constructed, and by the way, it's down here. Okay, this is my title. And what's nice about this title is that I made it dynamic. So I can take this line and stretch it further out. If the title changes, it gets longer, I can make the line longer. I can also click here and switch this so that it shows me the title only, or the title using my north arrow number 1, or use the title and north arrow number 2. And then just in case north isn't exactly pointing up, if it perhaps is pointing to the left, you can take that arrow and rotate it in that direction if needed. And those are dynamic properties that I assign to this block. And then this is a dimension style that I made here. And I want to show you how I put that together, but perhaps at a later date. For now, just take this block or take this drawing file and use the contents. I'll go back to my presentation plans and I will insert that drawing file into this drawing file. I'll go to Insert, click on Insert, and I'll go to Blocks from Libraries. And I've already used it before. You won't see this, but go ahead and click on the libraries and then click on the name of the drawing file and simply open. And mine closed out again. All I'm asking that you do is take that HWC annotations, that drawing file, the whole thing, and just click it and bring it into your file and just put it over here on the side for now. It should, and this doesn't always happen, but it should be taking on the properties of the annotation scale. I'll double check that in just a second. If I click on the block, you see that it is still acting as one. So I will go ahead and explode it. So let me tap the escape key. To explode a block, simply type X and enter. Select any part of that block and enter. How do I know if it is to the correct scale or not? Here's what I do. I'll click on one of the annotative blocks. And how do I know it's annotative? Because in my cursor, I see that symbol of that architectural scale, the profile of the scale. I click on it, and then I go over to my properties. And in the properties, it tells me annotative scale right now is 1/4 inch equals a foot. So it hasn't quite matched up. And that's all right. I can change it from here, but I'll show you another way to do it in just a second. So from here, if I click on that annotative scale, I click on the icon next to it, and I'll add a scale to it. And I'll pick the 3/32 scale from here. So that's 3/32. I'll click OK. And then I'll go ahead and click OK. So now it gets bigger. The block does, because it is matching the architectural scale. 3/32 is a smaller scale than 1/4 inch. So when the scale gets smaller, the text has to get bigger to compensate for that change. So that's one way to change it. And by the way, you're seeing it repeat twice, and that's because as soon as I highlight, it's showing me the active annotative scale. So 3/32 and 1/4 inch are right there. That's why you see two images, or like a ghosting of images. So I'll tap the escape key. And then I'm not going to worry about the fact that this is overlapping. That's okay. I can fix that later. I'll come over here and I want to show you something, how I can trigger all of these to change at once. Make sure that you click on the show annotation objects icon, and you also turn on add scales to annotative objects when the annotation scale changes. It's not always going to work, but here's what I do. I'll click on the annotation scale. I have it set to 3/32, but now I'm going to change it to 1/4 because that's what it was set to before. And now I'll set it back to 3/32. And when I do that, notice how the text changes. And it's okay that it's overlapping. All I have to do right now is simply take this line of text and just move it up out of the way. And yes, the other line of text is still ghosted down there, and that's all right. I can then take this one and move it up also, just to see everything. I'm going to leave it there for now, but this is the text that I want to use. These are the dimensions that I'll use later on, and that's the title that I want. But I want to show you something. I'm going to take the title here, and I'm simply going to select it and move it over here. I want my title to be towards the lower left-hand corner of my drawing, like this. So I'll place it right there. And then I'll tap the escape key. And this is not a plan view. This is a site plan. I'm going to double click the text. And when I double click the text, it gives me this enhanced attribute editor. And instead of it reading plan view, I need to change that, all caps, and it should read site plan. Notice how the name changes. The scale also needs to change. So I click on scale, and it's going to be 3/32. And then I'll click OK. And now for the arrow, I know that north is up. I'd like to change it and maybe use this north arrow, and then tap the escape key. Now, if you'd like, you can leave the line as it is, or you can take that line and extend it further. I've seen architectural drawings where they do one or the other, so it's an option. Now, let me go back to my layout. And when I look at the layout, there's the title, and it's coming in at the correct scale. The viewport is 3/32, and model space is 3/32. We'll go back to model space. And what I'll do now is actually move all of this information out of the way like that. So the next thing I want to do is put in my dimensions for the property. I'm not going to use the dimensions just yet. That's going to be for my floor plan. I'm simply going to use my single line text. And what I did here is I provided single line text that would appear at an 1/8 inch on the paper. So you can use that, or it's going to appear 3/32, and you can use that text if you want. And it's just a matter of copying it over and then editing the text. So that's a quick way of doing that. In my case, I think I'd like to go with the bigger text. I'm going to type CO for copy and enter. I'm going to copy that text, enter from here over there. And then I'll tap the escape key. And you'll notice it's carrying over that other ghosted image. I'm going to fix that now. It's highlighted. I go to properties. My annotative scale is 3/32. I'm going to click in that text box, click on the icon, and then take that 1/4 inch scale and delete it. Take the 1:1 scale and delete it. And all that's left for this annotative object is the scale of 3/32, which matches my current scale. And then I'll click OK. And that ghosting goes away because this is the only scale that I have for this annotative object. And now what I'm going to do is provide the dimension. And if you forgot the dimension, no big deal. Go back home, go over to measure and do the distance check from one endpoint to the other. And I have to make sure that I am at the edge of the property, 125 feet. When it comes to putting in the dimensions here for the site, the way we do that is type in 125.00 feet. Highlighting all the text, I double clicked on it. I'll type in 125.00 feet. And then I'll click off of it. And then I'll go ahead and enter. What I'd like to do is actually make this text centered. So I'm going to select it and go back to my properties, change the justification from left to center. And then I'll grip it from the center point, come over here, place it on the center of my property line, and then I'll simply move it up a little bit, straight up. So let me turn ortho on, right about there. Now I need to put the dimensions on the width of the property. And let me just do a distance check. Keyboard shortcut for that is DI, enter. Distance check from that point to that point, 40 feet. Okay. So what I'll do now is I will copy this text over here, turn ortho off, place it right there, tap the escape key. And here's what I'm going to do, double click it, and then change that 125 to 40, and then click off of the text, enter. And then I'll take the text, grip it, place it at the midpoint right there, and then go to my properties and rotate it from here. I could use the rotation tool, but from here, I just type in 90 and enter. And I've rotated it, and then I will grip it and move it up, turn ortho back on, and place it right there. Tap the escape key. And then the next thing I'd like to do is identify the street names. And since I started using that text that's going to appear an 1/8 inch in height when it's printed out, I'll keep going with it. You have the option, if you'd like, to use the other text that's going to appear at 3/32 if you'd like to. I'll leave it there. I need to identify my streets. So I'll simply make a copy of this text, enter, copy it from there, straight down right here. Come up with a fictitious name. You can call this street whatever you want. Given the fact that this is a Harold Washington College course, I'm going to take advantage of the name. So I'm going to double click this, and I'm going to call this one Harold Avenue. And then I'll take this text and I'll copy it. 1 second. Just place it right out here. Double click it, and I'll refer to this one as, did I type that right? No, I did not. I have a typo. Okay, there we go. Enter. And then I will go ahead and copy that text over here and just refer to this as my alley. We'll see that sometimes on some drawings. Now I go to my layout and I have my text and it's appearing at the correct size. To prove it to all of you, I'm going to draw a line. Actually, yes, I'll draw a line, and this line is going to be in paper space. Okay, so let me do this. Line in paper space like this. Okay. And I'm going to offset that line 1/8 of an inch. All right. Nope, wait 1 second. Offset the line 1/8. And then I'm going to do this. Zooming in, I'm going to move those two lines up right there. The text is coming in at 1/8 of an inch. Now, that's all I wanted to prove to you. Now I can escape and I can take these two lines and delete them. When I set up my text here, go to properties. You see where it says paper text height, 1/8 of an inch. How did I set this font up? How did I set this style up? If you go over to annotate, you'll see that what I used is a text style called titles. The font is Arial. I made it annotative. And then I left the paper text height at 0 so that I could control that. I took care of all of this, and then I put it into that drawing file so that you could use it. It would save you time. But if you were interested in knowing how it's done, there it is. So let me close out of that. That takes care of my site plan. That's all you need to put on that drawing file, or rather on that presentation file. And then what I like to do is I like to come back in here and fix my viewport. And if needed, I can make the viewport a little bit smaller, or I can make it just a little bit bigger and perhaps maybe bring it in a little bit here. On that side, maybe bring it in a little bit also. And here's where it gets a little tricky, because if I go to move it in, it wants to snap to that endpoint. And I think I'm moving it in, but as soon as I click, it goes right back to that endpoint. So here's where it's really, really helpful to turn off Object Snap. When you turn off Object Snap, now it's easier to move these around. It's not going to snap anywhere or to any endpoint or any intersection. So I'll do that. Come over here, take this viewport, bring it up right there. And now I can see my drawing. Let me tap the escape key. I can see the drawing within the viewport and how it is centered on my sheet of paper. And then if it wasn't, I can always type M and enter, and I can move this viewport, enter, somewhere else. You see that? It's nothing more than a viewport, and it will allow me to change the location. So I'll type M again, select the viewport, enter, and pick any point, and then turn ortho off. And I can see the viewport, it's floating, and I can visualize where I'd like to place it. And that's about equal distance from both sides. And then I just want it to be a little bit higher up. So I click right there. And that positions it within my border. And then I'll type zoom extents. So Z, enter, E, enter. And now if I go to print this out, I'll type Control P. I'll preview that. That's what my drawing will look like. It has all of the basic information that is needed for my site. has the property dimensions. It indicates the streets. It is indicating the alley there. I have street names, and I also have my title, and the title has a north arrow.